All right, we're going to get started with our webinar, a weekly webinar. So as always, if you're just joining us on YouTube and you want to keep up with our webinars and events, hit the subscribe and notification button. And if you like the video, hit the like button. That helps. But you want to keep up on your retirement education. And this webinar, I hope, will help do that. We're going to I'm going to address our format. So we start with about 15 minutes of the Ed Slott updates or updates from the Ed Slott Group. So you've heard me say that I'm a proud member of Ed's Master Lead Advisory Group and also on his advisor board now. And we get just constant updates from Ed and his group that are really helpful to us, and I hope that they're helpful to you. And we often talk about miss RMDs and other IRA issues that are common out there. But hopefully, the more you listen to this, you'll develop the skills and the knowledge to at least identify potential issues and then come to a qualified professional to help you with them. And then we're going to talk about the markets for about 15 minutes or so. And I'll give you some one or two analyst reports, and we'll talk about what happened last week in the markets. And then we're going to discuss our Financial 15. And I'm breaking these down. I hope you like these multi-part series because I'm breaking these down into some more detailed segments rather than trying to cover them all in one. So I'm always open to feedback. I'd love to hear. I do these webinars for you, so let me know what works best for you. But this week is going to start an additional 4-part series, and I say additional because it's really we've done this a bit in March, I think, but it was common retirement mistakes, and this is more or additional, not more common, but more common retirement mistakes. And this week we're going to talk about expenses because this is a big one that I see. This is usually one of the first parts of our financial planning process in that discovery mode, and we're talking about retirement expenses and what people plan on spending in retirement. So that is really, really important to get that right. All right, and we have classes starting on Thursday. So this is exciting because we're going to do a new format for our classes. So we're going to do a webinar format, which we've done many, many times, but this time it's going to be on YouTube and not on Zoom. So I'm excited and anxious about that all at the same time. So I hope that you're going to be joining us for the webinar series. So it's 2 classes. This is the Changing World of Retirement Planning classes. If you've attended it before, you're happy to attend. Again, I think that my friend Kathy is on the webinar today, and Kathy's attended the class many, many times, and that's great. I appreciate that, but you're welcome to attend as many times as you'd like. It's important to go and download the material prior to class because the workbooks that we're using are 2023 workbooks, of course, but we're going to be covering topics that are a little outside of the workbook as well. But that class, Thursday night class, starts this Thursday, September 28th at 6:30 p.m. Goes to 9:30 p.m. So kind of get comfy, have your coffee, tea, whatever it is you drink at night, and maybe a snack. And we'll take some breaks along the way. But 3 hours, it's a lot of material. Tuesday and then the following Thursday, October 5th, is the next one. And then we have a Tuesday series. So Tuesday, and that's from 6:30 to 9:30, and that's October 3rd and October 10th. And listen, feel free to share that invitation. So if you have someone who you care about, who you think would benefit from that class, excuse me, there is, I don't think there's capacity with, I know it's about 500 with Zoom, but I don't think there's a capacity for a live feed with YouTube. So feel free to share that invitation. I'm happy to have. It's kind of the more the merrier kind of approach. All right, I think that's everything as far as housekeeping and what's coming up. So let me just run through what the next series is going to be with the what we call the Financial 15, the last 15 minutes of this webinar. And the webinar, if you're watching this on the recording, which most people do, there are chapters within the webinar. So if you really don't want to hear me talk about what happened in the markets last week or analyst reports, you can move forward just by either sliding the bar over or down in the body of the description, there are links, right? Indexed areas of the video that show exactly where to jump into different parts. So as I said, this part 1 is going to be expenses and what your financial advisor or planner is probably missing or wrong about. Obviously not if we're your financial planner, but this is something I see from other advisors and planners out there, that they're missing these important topics. Part 2 is going to be medical after Medicare. So there's a lot of expenses that people aren't aware of after they start receiving Medicare benefits. Part 3, so that's next week. Part 3, that should be in 2 weeks. I haven't plotted out the holidays and things like that, but part 3 will be IRMA. That's income-related monthly adjustment amounts. And part 4, I'm saving the crescendo. Well, it's always last, right? Is taxes. So part 4 will be taxes, and just so much to cover with taxes. All right, let's jump into it here. So I'm going to share my screen here. And I'll try to make sure that I'm not blocking you. So this starts the Slott mailbag, and that's RMD rules for inherited IRAs and 401k distributions. And that's from today's Slott mailbag. And that comes from us last week from Ian Berger, our friend Ian. And this question is, I have a new inherited IRA, and I believe that I am subject to both the 10-year rule and to annual RMDs. Is this true? Now, if you think that's true and you want to comment, go ahead and comment. I'd love to hear your feedback. You guys are becoming expert about this. So let's give the facts. The original owner was 92 and passed in September 22. So the original owner of the IRA was 92 and passed in September 22. The original owner was taking RMDs and took the 2022 RMD in February of 2022. My brother and I, age 61 and 63, each inherited half of this IRA. The paperwork on this inheritance was not complete until late January 2023. We are non-spouse beneficiaries, sons of the decedent. They go on to write, how do we calculate the RMDs we need to take, if any? What balance do we use? Balance dated when? Whose age or life expectancy do we use? When does a 10-year rule clock start for us? These are really, really great questions. And if you have any insights on these answers for Mark, just type them into your chat. I'd love to hear. But here we go with the answer. Hi, Mark. Ian writes, you are correct. Each of the inherited IRAs is subject to both the 10-year payment rule and annual RMDs. I assume the inherited IRA has been split into separate accounts. If not, that should be done by 12/31/2023. Since death was in 2022, the 10-year period begins in 2023, and the inherited IRAs must be emptied by 12/31/2032. Annual RMDs originally would have been required starting in 2023, but the IRS has waived 2023 RMDs for beneficiaries in your situation. That is a temporary waiver. That's not a permanent change. You shouldn't rely on that, because the IRS has sent us such confusing and delayed direction on these things. They've waived the last couple of years. Just not for RMDs as a whole, just for inherited RMDs in certain circumstances. If RMDs are required for 2024, depending on the future IRS guidance, they would be based on the 12/31/2023 account balances. If you turned 63 this year, your 2024 RMD would use a 23.5 life expectancy factor under the IRS single life table. You can download, just as an aside, you can download those tables from our website at attleborowealth.com. That's attleborowealth.com. You can download those tables from our website. So if you go to the slot corner up in the top of the website, it says the slot corner, and go to that page and you scroll all the way down. Those tables are there and available for downloading. So what Ian is talking about is the single life table. That's what you use for inherited IRAs. And let's go back to this. So you would use a single life table, and that tells you where the factor is. And that's where he's getting that factor from. 24.5 is the factor for a 63-year-old that you would have used for the 2023 RMD minus 1. Oh, so I'm sorry. So let me go back. If you turn 63 this year, your 2024 RMD would use the 23.5 life expectancy factor under the IRS single lifetime table. 24.5 the factor for a 63-year-old that you would have used for the 2023 RMD minus 1. So let me explain that. So with normal RMDs, we go to a table, we look at I'm talking about your own RMDs. You go to the table, you're 73 years old, and you slide over and you see what your life expectancy is per the IRS. And now they actually have the percentage with the new table, but you would see what that is. And then that's age 73. I don't remember off the top of my head, but at age 73, it would tell us what that life expectancy table is. Well, let's do it. Let's share it. We've got a little bit of time, and we're just all hanging out together. Obviously not to my desktop, but you would go to outofourwealth.com and download these tables. But here's the table. So in a traditional situation, this is for your own IRA. Let me make sure I'm sharing this. I just blocked myself. Okay. You would, say you turn 73, you would go, and the factors, so what Ian is talking about, this factor is 26.5. So you would divide the year-end value of your IRA. So you turn 73 this year, let's just say, and you want to use the year-end value of your IRA or IRAs as of 12/31/2022, and you divide it by 26.5, and that would give you your RMD amount. You could also multiply it by 33.77%, and that would give you your RMD amount. So that's if it's your own RMD. So if we scroll down, this is the single life expectancy table, and this is what you use for inherited IRAs. So what Ian's talking about is he went to age 63, 24.5. So even though there's not an RMD due this year, you would still use that for calculating. And then this is where people make mistakes. They say, okay, well, next year I'm going to go to this table again, and I'm going to look at age 64 because that person's hopefully going to be 64 next year. And the factor here is 23.7, but they would have done their RMD incorrectly, because what actually you do under the IRS guidelines is you say 24.5 is where I start, and you never go back to the table again. You just subtract 1 every year after that, and that's only for inherited IRAs. Let me say that again. That's only for inherited IRAs. The RMDs are calculated differently. You do not go back to the table every year. You start with the first year. The first year, in this case, 63 and 24.5, and then you subtract 1 every year going forward. So I hope that makes sense, and Ian's going to talk about that a little bit here. Okay, so now we're back, and I wanted to explain what he meant by the factor for a 63-year-old that, let me see, I'm right here. So going back to this, if you turn or turned, I'm right here. Let me highlight where I am. There we go. If you turn or turned 63 this year, your 2024 RMD would use a 23.5 life expectancy factor under the IRS single life table. Like I just showed you, that is 24.5, the factor for a 63-year-old that you would have used for the 2023 RMD minus 1. The 2025 RMD would be based on a 22.5 factor, 23.5 minus 1, and so forth. Your brother's 2024 RMD, assuming he turns 61 this year, would be based on a 25.2 life expectancy factor, 26.2 the factor of a 61-year-old, and he would have used for the 2023 RMD minus 1. I know that's confusing, and again, that's why it's really good to have qualified advice. And I'm going to talk later when we talk about retirement mistakes, about what most financial advisors and financial planners miss in the planning process. Folks, this is something that planners and advisors mess up all the time because they don't specialize in these areas, and they just use general calculators that websites have for RMDs. And you can see, because I showed you the table, that inherited IRAs RMDs are calculated differently than your own RMDs. So the next question. I have a client who is 73 years old, still works, and does not have an ownership interest in her employer. She therefore has not been taking RMDs from her 401k. So that's 401k, not IRA. Remember, the rules are different for IRAs and 401ks. She rolled over a portion of her 401k to her traditional IRA this year and continues to work for this company. She does not intend to retire until next year or later. She will continue to take RMDs on her IRA based on the prior year end balance. So she does not intend to retire until next year or later. She will continue to take RMDs on her IRA based on the prior year end balance. If there are any, is there any RMD this year relative to the partial rollover from her 401k? So what is really this asking? She's using the still working exemption for her RMDs from the 401k. So that says that unless you're more than a 5% owner of the company, if you're still working, required minimum distributions are not required from your 401k, not IRAs. They're separate. I know I said it before, but I can't say it enough. Just from your 401k for the plan that you're working in. If you have other 401ks, it's a different story. The plan where you're working. So now though, this person, even though she's not going to retire until next year, she rolled over a portion of her 401k to her IRA. So the question is there any RMD now relative to the partial rollover from her 401k? Really, really great question. So the answer is no. Her 2023 IRA RMD will be based on the 12/31/2022 IRA balance, which does not include the amount rolled over earlier this year, 2023. And she does not have a 2023 RMD due from the 401k since she's still working for her employer. So that's a correct answer, but I think there could have been some more discussion around that because the person getting this answer might assume that since that even though she's rolled over her IRA, a portion of her 401k to her IRA, she's not subject to RMDs in that IRA. But the fact that's not true. The fact is that the only reason she doesn't have RMDs now from that money that she rolled into an IRA is because she rolled it in 2023. So next year, she will certainly have RMDs due out of that portion that she rolled into her IRA. So I hope that makes sense. All right. The next, this isn't questions. This is an education piece by Ian also. Beware of investing in NFTs, non-fungible tokens. So this is something that's, along with cryptocurrency, it's gotten very, very popular over the past few years. So I thought it was appropriate. But this, Ian goes on to write, if you are thinking of buying an NFT or a non-fungible token with your IRA funds, you may want to reconsider. And notice 2023-27, the IRS said that NFTs associated with collectibles are prohibited IRA investments. This could expose you to significant taxes and penalties. IRAs are subject to strict prohibited transaction rules to ensure that an IRA owner or related party does not engage in self-dealing, but only a few IRA investments are prohibited: collectibles, life insurance, and S corporation stock. So what is a collectible? Under the tax code, it includes any work of art, any rug or antique, any metal or gem, any stamp or coin except for certain gold coins or silver coins minted by the Treasury Department, as well as certain bullion, any alcoholic beverage, or any other tangible personal property specified by the IRS. Notice 2023-27 says that an NFT is itself a collectible if it is associated with any of these prohibited collectibles. So the argument was, well, this is not a collectible. It's just tied to the value of a collectible. The IRS said that doesn't fly. This would occur if the NFT either gives the NFT holder a right to a prohibited collectible or certifies ownership of a prohibited collectible. If an NFT is considered a collectible, then an IRA investment in the NFT is prohibited and would result in a deemed distribution to you in the year of your investment. It's called a deemed distribution because you don't have to withdraw the collectible from the IRA when the distribution on the investment occurs. The amount of the distribution is the original cost of the collectible. If you are investing a traditional IRA in a collectible, all or part of your deemed distribution may be taxable. And if you're under age 59 and a half, you may also be subject to a 10% early distribution penalty. This is important because I don't want to stereotype, but most of the people investing in crypto and NFTs are younger than 59 and a half. So these folks are being persuaded to invest in these NFTs inside their IRAs, and the IRS is telling us that if it's an NFT that's tied to a collectible or is considered a collectible, and I'm under 59 and a half, or the person investing in it is under 59 and a half, that, let's just say they invest $100,000 of their IRA funds into this NFT, that is a prohibited investment. That's considered a distribution, so that equals tax. And if you're under 59 and a half, that equals a 10% penalty. So this is a very, very important notice, and this is just one example of the excellent information that we get from the Slott Group. By contrast, if you're investing if you're investing a Roth IRA in a collectible, the deemed distribution would not be taxable if the distribution is qualified. We talked about qualified distributions yesterday. We talked about qualified distributions last week on our webinar. I'm sorry, it wasn't even last week. It was 2 weeks ago. So it was 2 weeks ago we talked about qualified Roth distributions in our Financial 15 portion of our weekly webinar. So by contrast, if you're investing a Roth in a collectible, the deemed distribution would not be taxable if the distribution is qualified. To be qualified, the investment must have been made after any of your Roth IRAs has been held for at least 5 years, and when you're at least 59 and a half, if the distribution is not qualified, the Roth IRA ordering rules apply, and all or part of the distribution may be taxed to you. So think carefully before making any new IRA investments in an NFT that is associated with prohibited collectible. But what if you already have that type of investment in your IRA? Any IRA investment in NFTs made before 2020 would probably be okay, since the IRS issues would be barred by the usual 3-year IRS statute of limitations. However, it's not clear whether the IRS will retroactively go after investments made after 2019, but before March 21st, 2023. The date notice 2023-27 was issued. If you're in that boat, by all means, see a CPA or a tax attorney for advice. All right. Hope that was helpful. All right. Let's talk a bit about the markets here. So I'm going to first give you kind of a replay of what happened last week in the markets. So this was another example of the zigs and the zags going the same way. So the Dow Jones Industrial Average was down 1.89. The S&P 500 was down 2.91. And if you don't know what I'm talking about the Dow Jones Industrial Average and the S&P 500, we have a video about the what the different indices are and where they come from and what they mean. So really across the board, everything was down. NASDAQ was down 3.61%. The MSCI World Index minus the U.S. was down 2.20%. Emerging markets, Europe, Asia, and the Far East down to both just over 2%. So everything's still positive from the stock side, or most things, I should say, are still, most of the major indices are still positive year to date, ranging from 3.27 all the way up to the NASDAQ at 27.03. But everything was down last week. The U.S. aggregate bond index was also down 0.5%. So this is what investors learned in 2022. Stocks and bonds can fall at the same time. Last year, 2022, was very impactful and very eye-opening for people, because most people allocate their funds into bonds to offset the risk of stock, and they got hurt potentially on both sides of that. Stand by 1 second. I'm just pulling back up my YouTube to make sure I'm not missing any questions. Okay. So as I said, the majority of bond investors invest in the type of bonds that are covered by the U.S. aggregate bond index, and that was down 0.5%. But all of the major bond indices were down last week, as were all the major stock indices. So how we gauge the growth or fall of the market, everything on both sides of it was down. So folks, this is why Your strategy should include not just asset allocation, that's the mix of stocks, bonds, and cash, but also principal protection, something that can't fall below zero, but can still have some growth, and account segmentation, aligning your investments with the times in your life that you're going to need them. So that helps alleviate all these concerns about what's going to happen when the markets move. All right, so that's a general look at last week's market. The Fed funds we're going to talk about, but the Fed funds rate target rate has not changed, so they did not raise rates last week. We're still at 5.5%. 1 year ago, we were at 3.25%. If we went back a year prior to that, we were probably still at 0.25%. We heard from BlackRock this week. BlackRock talked about they believe real yields, and they're talking about from bonds, create attractive fixed income. So that's bond. So the interest that we're getting from bonds create attractive fixed income investment opportunities. They write that stock prices are generally high, but there is value in some parts of the market. So that means that overall they feel the stock market is at a high level, but they still see some opportunity in certain areas of the market. And they write, given higher than normal correlations in stock and bond performance, diversification is critical. We like the yield and relative safety of shorter duration treasuries in combination with select opportunities in higher yield asset classes like emerging market debt and private credit. And they go on to write, the end of summer may bring lower temperatures, but interest rates and U.S. stock valuations remain high. In this environment, we prefer high quality within both stocks and bonds, and given the recently higher correlations in the performance of these markets, are seeking additional diversification via alternatives. So that's alternative investments. Again, that is not a recommendation. I'm just reading to you what the BlackRock analysts are saying this week. So what I thought was interesting about this, where is that? Given the last point that they write, given higher than normal correlations in stock and bond performance. So what does that mean? Correlation being that the stocks and bonds are moving very much in the same direction. So as I said, we experienced it greatly last year, 2022. Both stocks and bonds ended down generally. And I just told you that we're seeing, we experienced that last week again. So the Dow Jones, I think I told you, the Dow Jones Industrial Average was down about 1.89%. The S&P 500 was down 2.9%. But the bond market, the U.S. bond market, ranged from 0.5% down to 0.65% to over 1.31% down. So not much better than the stock market. Still down, right? Not down as much, but still down. So that's what's called correlation. They're moving together. So BlackRock again says, given higher than normal correlations in stock and bonds performance, diversification is critical. And they talk about emerging market debt and private credit and alternative investments. So there's a lot of discussion around alternative investments. They can be very, very good. Happy to talk to you about that strategy. Those strategies, if you'd like, you can reach out to us at, questions at attleborowealth.com. That's questions at attleborowealth.com if you want to schedule time to talk about those things. But these are some very, very important points from BlackRock. Now let's talk about from Cornerstone. They talked about the Federal Reserve keeping rates steady at 5.25% to 5.5% as expected. The decision was what the market expected. The big surprise appeared to be that the Fed indicated that economic growth needed to slow for inflation to come down and stay down. This view is not a surprise to us, but some investors expected inflation would come down even as solid economic growth continues. So that's the concern, is that investors are expecting, they keep hearing this soft language or soft language. Investors keep hearing this soft landing kind of approach where, well, geez, everything's, the Fed's moderating interest rates and inflation, and this inflation's going to settle down, but we're not going to lose economic growth. It's not likely to happen that way. And I'll just repeat it. Some investors expect that inflation would come down even as solid economic growth continues. Not likely. And the leading indicators report that came out last week also continues to prove that we're starting to see some signs of some difficulty. So leading indicators declined by 0.4% month over month versus the 0.3% decline in January, and is down 3.8% over the February-August 2023 period. But what does that mean? The leading economic indicators continue to signal a recession, but economic growth has remained robust. There are signs of potential weakness, with retailers warning of the potential for consumer softening and credit conditions continuing to tighten. So what that means, folks, is people are spending less money. We're starting to see it around us with contractors and whatnot, but there are certainly signals out there that we should be paying attention to. This is not driving you to the fear side. It's just driving you to the awareness side. Let's see. So they go on to write, the Fed was the major market driver for the week, with stocks falling and yields moving slightly higher following the meeting. So yields went up, bond values came down. That's typically how it works. Higher rates for longer have the potential to drag down economic activity and make future cash flows less valuable to investors. This could continue to have negative impact on the tech sector. A potential government shutdown could add volatility, but we don't believe such an event would cause any long-term damage. In a tough seasonal time of the year, the market continues to hold up relatively well, and we don't believe we're on the verge of a severe downturn, but acknowledge that risks have risen and reiterate the need to keep portfolios close to target allocations. And make sure that your plan is driving your investment decisions, that you've got your asset allocation straight and together. You're paying attention to those components. You know, we can get a lot done with high-quality short-term bonds right now, as opposed to taking longer-term risk. But you got to be careful about that too. I've had conversations with folks, and this is a concern with the markets too. As these short-term rates creep up, you know, you can get a money market for 5%. You can buy very short-term U.S. Treasuries, no risk there, that are well over 5%. So 3 months, 6 month period of time. People are asking themselves, why would I take the risk of the stock market for a few more percentage points? And that's a really good question. But the thing is that these short-term rates like this cannot last for a very, very long time. So I don't know what that time is, 12 to 18 months maybe, but that's something to pay attention to, and let your plan drive your investment decisions, and have your proper asset allocation, principal protection, and account segmentation in place. And that's how you combat these things, because the experts have differing opinions as well. All right, let's go into our next segment. So we are going to now jump into our financial planning topic, or what we call our financial 15. And today is more common retirement mistakes. Again, that is not more common. It's more common retirement mistakes, because I did a video like this just a few months ago. I think it was back in March. But there are other things that have come up. I thought it was good to address it again. So this is part 1 in a 4-part series. We're going to talk about, let's see if I can remember. We're going to talk about expenses today. We're going to talk about medical costs. And I'm going to touch on some of these things today, and you'll see an asterisk next to those things. And that just means we're going to have a discussion about it later on. So this is part 1 of 4. So we're going to talk about expenses today. We're going to talk about medical expenses. We're going to talk about IRMA. That's a big one, income-related monthly adjustment amounts. And we're going to talk about taxes. And these are things that your financial planner or financial advisor might be missing or might be wrong about. I do hear this. I have the opportunity to coach financial advisors all around the country, and often they're surprised when I bring these things to their attention, and they say, oh my gosh, I should have been thinking about that. And listen, that's okay. Better to have a financial advisor that takes the time and says, oh my gosh, rather than someone who never reaches out to learn about these things, doesn't engage an organization like the Slott Group, the Power Zero Group, or study groups that we have to make ourselves better. Some people just stand out there on the island and say, this is the way I've always done it. Everything will work out just fine. And they're missing a lot. So the first thing is, you can see here, and I'm going to change my pad here So then I'm looking down. You're going to see me look down. I'm just drawing on this. Okay. Don't use the 4% rule. So if you attend a class, or if you've attended classes before, you've heard me talk about this 4% rule. This 4% rule was put together by a financial advisor. His last name is Bengen. And he basically said, very generally said, if you don't draw more than 4% of your portfolio, given certain circumstances, then you should not outlive your money. And that the circumstances are the growth of your stock value, the growth of your bond values, the allocation, how it's situated, the 60-40, 65-35, etc. But that rule is really, really broken, and you shouldn't use that because, first of all, it should be adjusted for inflation, and there's just a lot of things that can go wrong just by saying, I've got $1 million, I'm going to draw $40,000 a year. There's just a lot that can go wrong with that. So don't use the 4% rule. You want and that's called a withdrawal rate, 4% withdrawal rate, like how much you can withdraw from your portfolio. And folks, that's all over the internet, by the way, this 4% rule, but you want your own withdrawal rate. So you want to come up with your own withdrawal rate. And I'm going to tell you a secret. The withdrawal rate really it's not that it doesn't matter, but you can't set a static withdrawal rate. I'm trying not to get into this too much, but withdrawal rates don't happen like this. So if you retire at 65 and say you die at 95, and in this example, 4%, and in fact, Benjamin says it should go up every year with inflation. But that's not really true either. What typically happens is this. Your withdrawal rate will start higher, right? So your withdrawal rate just may end up being 4%. Who knows? So let's use that amount. But you've got to determine, and we're going to talk about this, through your exploration of your expenses, you have to determine what your withdrawal rate is. But let's say it starts at 4%. Let's call it here. And it holds there for 5 years. So now you're 70 years old. It could dip down. Why could it dip down? Well, maybe in the beginning of your retirement, you might want to do things. You might want to travel more. You might want to, we're going to talk about some of these things, but you might want to buy some things, boats, RVs, vacation homes. So your withdrawal rate could be higher, and then you could slow down a little bit, right? And so it could come down. And that might stay that way for, say, 10 years. And this is just an example, folks. But inevitably, it tends to creep up again. This withdrawal rate tends to increase. And sometimes it goes very, very high by the time you're no longer here. And why might that be? This kind of upside down bell curve is, it's so shaky, upside down bell curve. This is often due to fun and planning, because we specialize in tax efficient planning. And when people meet us, they might say, okay, well, I'm planning to spend X on my retirement expenses. And we say, well, what if you spent a little bit more in the beginning to pay for your taxes now, so you don't have to pay tax in the future? And we're adding to those expenses in the beginning. So in the beginning, it might be fun and planning. And then in this section, this second part here, and who knows? I mean, you may not slow down at 70. You might not slow down until 75 or 85. There's plenty of people still having fun at age 85. But this could be kind of the, I really don't like this, but people talk about go, no-go, slow-go periods of retirement, but this could be the slow down, let's call it. Still having fun, but you've spent your money on your tax, so now those expenses are real low. You're now collecting your Social Security, so your withdrawal rate on your expenses is lower, so that's come down. So now maybe it started at 4%, and now maybe it's 2%. And this period in your 70s, 75, 80, 85 years old, but then suddenly it spikes up here, and it could go back to 4, 5, 6, 7, and we see that almost solely due to medical. And we're going to talk about that as well. So don't use the 4% rule. Use your own rule. Figure out your own withdrawal rate, and you have to develop that. And that's what you work with, and you should review it every single year and update it. So what kind of expenses are we talking about? Well, first we're talking about essential expenses. So these are things that you must have during your retirement. And well, I'm going to come back to that. So the essential expenses, I went through and I think I got them all, but there could be some others, and we're going to talk about how we identify those others. And what's essential to me might be different than what's essential to you, frankly. And that's part of the problem too, is that, what's not on this list: housing, food, transportation, utilities, healthcare, taxes, entertainment, other, pet care. Pet care is a big one. I see people spend thousands of dollars a year in pet care, and I think we're one of them, right? So my wife and I, we have a couple dogs. We have 6 chickens. We have, there's a rabbit in the house. And so we spend money on pet care. And that should, no kidding, that needs to be part of your calculation, because it's not uncommon to see people spend thousands of dollars a year, $5,000 a year or more on pet care. And some of you might be nodding your head saying, oh, that seems right. And some of you might be saying, what? That's crazy. But that is just an example. And that might be essential to you, right? Pets are a big part of your life, whatever. But the normal ones are housing, food, transportation, utilities, healthcare, and that has an asterisk on it because we're going to have a whole section about healthcare. So I'm going to really try not to go off too much about that. And we have expected healthcare expenses. Hey, I know what my planned expenses are. And then we have unexpected healthcare expenses. And we're going to talk more in detail about that in a couple of weeks. Well, then, folks, we have taxes. We have property taxes and income taxes. Not only federal income tax, but state and local income taxes, potentially. There are different rules depending on where you live regarding state and local tax. But it's really hard to, without proper planning, avoid that federal tax, and we're gonna talk about that in depth a couple of weeks. And then you have entertainment. People forget about this one because I'll talk to people on the phone or in a introductory meeting, or an introductory or first start in the planning meeting, and they'll say, I need to spend about $6,000 a month, or $8,000 a month, or $10,000 a month, or whatever their number is. And I'll say, does that include fun? They'll say, what do you mean? Does that include going to dinner, going to movies, travel? And they'll say, no, you know what? I hadn't thought about that. I just tallied up what our basic bills are and figured it out from there. Well, you don't want to just, most people don't want to just live in, be sheltered in their home during retirement. They want to enjoy themselves and do fun things, entertainment and fun. And I would argue that they're essential. That's essential part of retirement. It's not just food, fuel, or food, water, and shelter. It's everything that life includes and is involved in living a fulfilled life. So I would argue that these are essential expenses. So you want to include that. And it's not uncommon, folks, for people, and I'm going to talk about this in a bit. Actually, I'm going to let myself talk about it then. So you have your essential expenses, and then you have your aspirational expenses. Well, travel and vacation. So you might, the average we see for travel is about $10,000 a year and for a married couple, right? For a couple who enters retirement together. So you can cut that in half for an individual, maybe. But we see about $10,000 a year, but it's not uncommon to see $35,000 to $40,000 a year of planned retirement expenses in the first few years of retirement. And we typically plan these out until age 85. Now, I'm going to tell you that most people don't travel that heavily until age 85, but there are some out there who do. So that's important. So you want to have an idea of how much you're going to spend for travel. And don't worry about, inflation is a cost, but a good financial planner should be saying to you, give me the cost of things today. We're going to adjust the inflation. That's not something that you should be concerning yourself with. Gifting to family and friends, or gifting to charity. So after all of your needs are taken care of, and that's important, I don't want to tell you how to do your business, but be careful not to focus on gifting before you focus on your own needs. That does happen. It may seem very logical and normal to you to say, well, of course we want it before we give it anything to anyone else. But some people are very, very giving, and that comes first, and that can get them in, put them in difficult situations. And also, we're going to talk about this in shock expenses, but sometimes family can get more expensive than we think it's going to be. But we have these aspirational expenses, and that's family, friends, gifting, travel, maybe a vacation home. You might want to buy a house in, a lot of people are avoiding Florida now because of the cost of insurance, but it could be anywhere, folks. We're gonna have a trip to Arizona in a few months. I am certain I'm going to be looking at the real estate situation in Arizona because that's just what I always do. But so it could be just about anywhere, and that could be an aspiration for you. Is, hey, I'd love to have a vacation home. I'd love to have it here. I'd love to have 2 or 3 or just 1 or rent vacation homes. I don't know. You could also want a boat or an RV. I see RVs a lot. I don't see many boats, but many people come into us when they come in to speak to us, and they talk about, we love to buy an RV, and travel around the country and spend time out on the road. And that is a really common goal for folks. So not only, let's just recap here. Not only your essential expenses, but also your aspirational expenses. Don't forget those in your planning, and don't let the person you're working with forget those either. Now, these are the big ones that most people are not considering. These are the ones that I say, really honestly, very, very few financial advisors are going to forget aspirational expenses because they're exciting. Well, tell me about the travel you want to do. Tell me about the vacations that you want to take, because that puts you in an excited, kind of a thoughtful and dreamy mood, position. What kind of gifting would you like to do your friends and family? So these are all really positive things. Folks, you got to pay attention to these potential shock expenses, or things that can have a significant impact to your retirement that you're probably or may not be considering. And unfortunately, most financial professionals are not talking about. Out-of-pocket medical expenses. If you're listening to this and you're over 65, Medicare carries costs, right? You not only pay for the cost of Medicare, and we're going to talk about IRMA and the added potential costs of Medicare, but there are out-of-pocket potential costs of Medicare. And we're going to have a whole discussion about that, so I'm not going to go into discussion about it right now. But if you're over 65 and you're already receiving your Medicare benefits, that there are other things that need to be considered that most people it's not even on their radar until that happens, until that time comes, or maybe right before it. And if you start planning for your retirement in your 50s, I can guarantee you 2 things. The cost of medical care after age 65 when you receive Medicare, tax on your Social Security. So 3 things. The cost of medical care after you start receiving Medicare benefits, tax of your Social Security benefits, and IRMA, income-related monthly adjustment amounts. Now, those last 2 things, or all 3 of those things, we're going to talk about in more detail in the following weeks. But if you're just doing your retirement planning and you're 50 years old, 55 years old, or in your 40s, these things are not even on your radar. And unfortunately, most financial advisors aren't talking about it. So out-of-pocket medical expenses, out-of-pocket normal medical expenses if you're healthy. How about unexpected medical expenses? And this includes, yes, long-term care. Even though you're taught and you heard, many people who are listening to this broadcast right now, I am sure I'm not the first financial professional that you've listened to. I'm not the first CFP who you've sat down and heard a webinar by. When I do the class, I am certain that I am not the first presenter at a financial class who is going to talk about that you have more than a 70% chance of needing long-term care at some point in your retirement. But people still don't plan for it. People still just hope it doesn't happen to them. Long-term care is a big one, but it just doesn't have to be long-term care. What about, a significant injury or a significant illness that could really derail things? So unexpected medical expenses. These are shock expenses that you just have to be aware of and have as part of your plan. Certainly long-term care, but these other things I mentioned, these other unexpected medical expenses, and it's not just for you, right? If you're fortunate enough to have children and they have medical issues, sometimes we get pulled into those things as well. Housing repairs. Folks, we're dealing with hurricanes, natural disasters, things like that. I mean, there's plenty of people who have beautiful vacation homes in Florida and along the coastal areas that are paying for things they probably never built into their financial plan. So think about these things. Family issues like divorce. And I have kids here because sometimes kids draw from our budget and our cash flow longer than we expect them to. And sometimes that goes well into your retirement. If your kids have physical impairments, medical issues, or mental health issues, you might feel that you want to take care of them for a longer period of time, and that's great if you can. You just want to make sure that it's part of your consideration. And unexpected inflation. So for many, many years, we were seeing very, very low inflation. And when I was talking to people about, you got to be concerned about higher inflation, because we've had low inflation and low interest rates for many, many years, and people got very complacent. And they said, now, or even if they agreed with me and nodded their heads, in the back of their mind, many times they said, yeah, but I haven't seen it. I haven't seen it. But we've seen it now, haven't we? So inflation is still high. Things still cost a lot of money. Shop for a car right now. It's better than it was this time last year, but it's still pretty crazy. And transportation is one of our essentials. Right? So unexpected inflation. We all know that our food costs more. We all know we have to or we choose to make different decisions, probably when we're shopping. But unexpected inflation is something you want to consider as well. What most are missing, what most individuals and unfortunately, most financial advisors are missing is higher taxes. Not planning for the potential doubling of higher taxes, probably by year 2030, and how that's going to affect your retirement plan. As I said before, taxation of Social Security, IRMA, we talked about that again, but actual expenses. Most financial advisors or financial planners, because I've seen it over and over again, a new client, new planning client, new client just in general comes to them, and that client says, I spend $8,000 a month. And that financial planner takes that $8,000 a month, plugs it into their retirement plan, and they say, well, hey, this is what it's going to look like. They adjust inflation. They do all those things. They have their inflation rate, whatever it is. And they say, okay, now this $8,000 a month, you're going to project out. Folks, that $8,000 a month is probably wrong. So in the past, I used to say, I don't know why, but we have a lot of engineers as clients, but I know why now. I worked with a coach last year, and we looked at different things. And he said to me, I can tell you exactly why you attract engineers to your practice, because we don't advertise to engineers, we don't all that. But this person says because you have written processes and checklists and certain ways that you get things done, and engineers and people who think that way appreciate that. And I'm not saying that's better than anybody else. It's just the way that we do things here. But we have written processes and checklists that we follow for everything. And people wired that way, or who are trained that way as engineers, they appreciate that. That's what he said to me. So I get that. But I tell you that because I've had many, many people come and say, Mark, I know we need exactly $7,692 a month, because I've been tracking on a spreadsheet for the last 30 years our expenses, and I know that's exactly what it is. And then I say, that's fine. Here's what I'd like you to do. I'd like you to fill out our spreadsheet, and there's nothing great about this spreadsheet except it's just decades of information that we've put together and added and changed things. And when somebody goes through this, I don't know if I've ever had a situation where someone hasn't said, oh, you know what? I wasn't thinking about this. I wasn't thinking about these gifts, or I wasn't thinking about this part of travel. I'm kind of just going, I told you pets is a big thing. Oh, I wasn't considering that. That's something we kind of track on the side because there's a lot of reasons for it, but sometimes you just don't want to acknowledge it. It could be many, many things. So when we go through this exercise and we hear over and over again from people, geez, that exercise was really, really helpful to us to go through. So whether it's this spreadsheet here or we have it online, people talk about how helpful that is. And what that often does is it fleshes out this $7,692 a month becomes $10,284 a month. And I'm just kind of making that up, but that's a big difference. And that is not an unusual difference. And I see I'm covering that. So let me go back and just say that when we flesh that out, this $7,692 a month here can become $10,284 a month. And that is a very, very big difference and can have a huge impact on your financial plan and the success of your plan. And listen, I could tell you so many examples of that. So that is what we call actual expenses. And most financial planners, unfortunately, just don't go through that exercise for a couple different reasons. First of all, it takes a lot of time from our point of view. We've got to go through, we've got to have you complete this expense spreadsheet. It's a pain point for some people, and some financial advisors, financial planners, they don't want to make the road difficult because they feel that, this is my opinion, that if you make the road difficult or challenging, then people may not come along. What I found is if you really go through and give folks a detailed process and really work out these issues that they are not considering and other professionals likely aren't considering, actual expenses, IRMA, tax on Social Security, higher taxes, for example, then that gives them the comfort and really knowing that they're going to likely have a successful plan or a better opportunity for a successful plan rather than just kind of rubber stamping. Okay, $8,000 a month, that's what it is. Well, what about this? What about that? You've got to ask those what if questions. Like, what if this happens? What if we have a shock expense? What if we need a new home? What if our daughter who has these issues, needs extra care, needs to move back in with us? What's that going to look like? And just these actual expenses, you just can't take it at face value. You got to dig in and work, and you got to do that every single year, folks. And that is another thing that most are missing, and that is review and update. I'm not talking about portfolio reviews. I'm talking about plan reviews and updates. This work should be done every single year. All right. I think Jerry has a question. Moving to a less expensive state for LTC, long-term care expenses should be considered. You believe this because you say it often, and I appreciate it. The Northeast versus Florida, for example, memory care is $12,000 to $15,000 a month versus $4,000 a month. So Jerry's telling us, and I believe Jerry, but I don't have any information about this. What Jerry's telling us is that one of the things that maybe folks should consider is moving to a different area. And it is very true that cost of care varies greatly from area, state to state, and you can do your own research on that using a tool called the Genworth Cost of Care. If you Google that, you can put in the zip code where you live or where you are looking at potentially residing, towards the end of your life, and you can see what the care costs are there. So that's a good point, Jerry. All right, it is 11:01, folks. I hope this was helpful. So we went over the slot report. Or the slot questions. We reviewed the what happened to markets last week, and we talked about some analyst reports, and then we went over our financial 15, our last 15 minutes or so, a little bit longer today. And today was common retirement mistakes, the part 1 of a 4-part series. That this part is or was expenses during retirement and what you're probably or could be missing, and unfortunately what most financial advisors and financial planners miss in their retirement planning process. But not our group, folks. We have these processes and checklists in place that give our clients the comfort to help make sure their plans are successful. And that is the only commercial I'm going to give you about that. If you're not signed up for the upcoming class and you want to be, you can reach out to us at questions@attleborowealth.com. That's questions@attleborowealth.com. But all of you should have received invitations in email for that class. If you want to make time to see me and you're not yet a client, you can reach us at questions@attleborowealth.com. If you're a client, you need something, just reach out to us and we'll take care of it for you. But it was good seeing you all. Happy to be back, and we will see you next week on the webinar and maybe Thursday in the class. Thank you and have a great day.